Early October 2025 satellite images confirmed massive fires near Sevastopol's naval yards, evidence of yet another successful Ukrainian strike deep inside Crimea. How did the peninsula, once hailed as Russia's unsinkable aircraft carrier, descend into isolation and panic within months? And could this collapse mark the beginning of Moscow's strategic unraveling in the Black Sea? Military analysts from Reuters and Defense News note that these attacks form part of a deliberate Ukrainian plan, what NATO insiders now call the isolation doctrine. The campaign's effect has been devastating: radar coverage lost, key fuel lines cut, and command posts burned out. The domino effect perspective is unmistakable here. A single destroyed dock in September triggered shortages of spare parts that grounded entire squadrons by October. What began as tactical strikes evolved into a chain reaction that crippled Russia's logistics, energy flow, and morale. At the heart of this decline lies the collapse of illusions. Crimea was once a glittering emblem of Moscow's 2014 triumph. Now it is the symbol of its vulnerability. Russian Marines, trapped between dwindling supplies and Ukrainian reconnaissance drones, are forced to ration fuel and electricity. The BBC reported that Russian forces in western Crimea now receive less than half their normal resupply volume, a logistical suffocation accelerated by nightly drone raids that hit convoys on the E-105 highway. From the opportunity cost perspective, the consequences are even harsher. Each drone strike, forcing a new defensive deployment, drains critical air defense assets from the Belgorod and Rostov regions' areas, already under pressure from Ukrainian artillery. To defend a peninsula that is effectively besieged, Russia must strip protection from its own borderlands. This redistribution of scarce hardware, according to DW analysts, has forced Moscow to delay modernization programs worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Every burned radar or oil depot in Crimea therefore costs not only money, but strategic bandwidth, resources that can't be spent fortifying the rest of the front. Meanwhile, the strategic contrast perspective exposes the irony. Crimea was meant to be the fortress that projected power into NATO's southern flank. Instead, it has become the liability that drains it. Western defense think tanks argue that by 2025, the Black Sea Fleet spends 80% of its time in port, rarely daring to sail beyond short patrols under heavy escort. The once feared Moskva's demise in 2022 set the pattern, but the newer hits on landing ships in Feodosia and supply depots near Saki show how far Russia's deterrence has eroded. Amid the smoke and silence, a darker question lingers for both sides. Can Ukraine maintain this tempo of precision strikes without depleting its own drone arsenal and Western-supplied munitions? Analysts caution that sustaining rhythmic attrition demands not only courage, but constant industrial output, a race Kiev must win against exhaustion. Yet the night skies over Sevastopol still burn, signaling that Ukraine's asymmetric strategy is far from over. Each explosion is more than a tactical event. It is a signal to the world that technology and timing can overturn the weight of tradition. As the last fires die down, a new front quietly opens, one defined not by ships or soldiers, but by data drones and deception. What happens when innovation itself becomes the decisive weapon? Meanwhile, Kiev's intelligence planners were already preparing the next phase one that would test Russia's ability to adapt under relentless, invisible pressure. In the second week of October 2025, Ukrainian military sources confirmed that a coordinated drone and missile assault destroyed key infrastructure at the Saki air base and rendered several Russian aircraft unusable. This was no random strike. It followed a clear pattern in Ukraine's campaign: precision intelligence and psychological disruption. How can a country with no navy, limited air power, and only a fraction of its enemy's resources continue to dominate the battlefield in Crimea? The answer lies in how Ukraine has transformed the very definition of modern warfare. At the core of its approach is warfare by intelligence and innovation. With real-time satellite support from Western partners, AI-guided targeting systems, and autonomous drone swarms, Ukraine has turned its weaknesses into asymmetric strengths. This isn't just military improvisation, it's a calculated doctrine. According to Military Watch magazine, the use of AI-enhanced Flamingo drones combined with loitering munitions has allowed Ukraine to blind Russian radar networks before the actual missiles even launch. The destruction of the rare B-12 Chaika amphibious aircraft earlier this month, once a symbol of Russia's underwater surveillance dominance, underscored the scale of this shift. The Cold War-era planes stationed at Saki were obliterated in a midnight drone raid. Ukrainian field agents followed up by taking out a Mi-8 helicopter in the same area just days after two similar choppers were downed. NATO officials, speaking to The Guardian, called it a surgical dismembering of Russia's early warning system. This is a clear domino effect in motion. Take out the amphibious aircraft, and Russia's anti-submarine sweep over the Black Sea weakens. With no deep-sea tracking, the Black Sea Fleet becomes blind to Ukrainian naval drones. With the radar station at Niboyu knocked out, even the skies lose their defensive layer. And with every layer removed, another asset becomes exposed: missile silos, resupply trucks, mobile command centers. What began as a drone strike on a forgotten airstrip ends up shaping the theater-wide balance. But there's an added layer here: the opportunity cost for Russia is escalating fast. For every critical platform lost in Crimea, Moscow is forced to rush replacements from elsewhere, leaving strategic gaps across Russia's vast defense landscape. According to Al Jazeera, some air defense units were quietly redeployed from Kaliningrad and the Pacific Fleet Zone's areas that now stand more vulnerable to probing by NATO or Japanese surveillance. These trade-offs are no longer theoretical. They're operational vulnerabilities that Western planners are tracking closely. Ukraine's ability to do more with less isn't accidental, it's tactical. The Magura V-5 and Sea Baby marine drones have redefined sea warfare, proving that small explosive vessels can disable or destroy warships, costing hundreds of millions. In just the last 2 months, hits on the Olenogorsky Gornyak and Ivanovets have grounded entire logistics chains. And with Sevastopol's port no longer secure, the Black Sea Fleet is now split, its flagship units marooned in Novorossiysk, 400 kilometers from the combat zone. The strategic contrast is staggering. Russia once sold its Black Sea presence as a message of power to NATO's southern flank. Now its ships hide behind radar camouflage and short-range defenses, unable to project force beyond their dock. Ukraine, with no fleet of its own, has done what 31 NATO navies combined never attempted: forced the Russian Navy into retreat through drones alone. Can Moscow afford to absorb such steady losses without conceding space or worse initiative? What followed next was an even bolder move by Ukraine, one aimed not at the sea or the sky, but at the very ground that connects Crimea to the mainland. On the night of October 11, 2025, Ukrainian sea drones once again slammed into the supports of the Kerch Bridge, shaking its steel bones and halting freight movement for 72 hours. This was the third attack in 6 weeks, and perhaps the most symbolic. What happens when the only land route connecting Crimea to Russia becomes unreliable week after week? This was more than infrastructure damage. This was psychological warfare aimed at breaking the illusion of Russian control. From a domino effect standpoint, the consequences are immediate and cascading. With the bridge partially disabled, all logistical traffic, fuel, ammunition, medical supplies must reroute through ferries or vulnerable corridors exposed to Ukrainian missile range. According to a BBC report, satellite surveillance detected at least 7 makeshift ferry convoys attempting the Kerch crossing under cover of night in the days following the attack. 2 were intercepted. This consistent disruption is now reverberating through the military ecosystem in Crimea. Field hospitals near Simferopol report severe medicine shortages. Barracks in Jankoy run on emergency diesel, which itself arrives sporadically. The once reliable food supply chain has collapsed, forcing even elite Russian units to switch from hot meals to canned rations. The strategic opportunity cost is staggering in order to sustain 60,000 troops. Moscow must now airlift critical supplies at enormous expense or risk sea routes under drone threat. Each ton of supply is contested, each evacuation a gamble. Beyond the material, this campaign is deeply symbolic. The Kerch Bridge was the architectural heart of Putin's 2014 annexation victory, a $4 billion monument to permanence. Yet in 2025, it has become the focal point of strategic embarrassment. Every drone strike that cracks its pillars is a strategic contrast between Russia's claim to permanence and the reality of impermanence. NATO observers note that even during off-peak hours, Russian engineers now walk the bridge in shifts, scanning for sabotage signs, a haunting image of a superpower tiptoeing over its own territory. Meanwhile, Ukraine's use of Western-supplied Storm Shadow and Attack MS missiles continues to expose Russia's air defense flaws. After multiple S-400 batteries were overwhelmed by decoy drone swarms, real missiles followed through the breach, destroying launchers, radar vehicles, and command trailers. According to Defense News, at least 5 radar installations in southern Crimea were lost within 3 weeks, leaving huge swaths of airspace uncovered. Without its surveillance eyes, the S-400 becomes a blind colossus, a $500 million system neutralized by swarming UAVs worth under $50,000. The dominoes keep falling. Each strike that blinds a radar opens a window for the next drone wave. Each fuel depot destroyed causes delays down the line, and each bridge hit reduces maneuverability. By early October, the New York Times reported that Russia had reduced nighttime truck convoys across Crimea by 60%, fearing both missile strikes and drone ambushes. This is not just degradation, it's siege warfare by 1,000 invisible cuts. And as the lights dim across Sevastopol and the diesel runs low in Yalta, morale fractures. Even the Kremlin's once aggressive media tone has softened. Reports of logistical repositioning and civilian precautionary measures mask a deeper truth. Crimea is being hollowed out from within. Will Russia double down on defending a peninsula that drains more than it delivers? Yet Ukraine wasn't done. As Crimea weakened logistically, Kyiv's next move was to stretch the pressure across all 3 battlefronts, land, air, and sea, simultaneously. By mid-October 2025, a shift in Ukrainian tactics became evident. Instead of striking targets one by one, Kyiv began launching synchronized assaults on radar systems, ports, and bridges within the same 48-hour window. Was this the beginning of a high-tempo war aimed at total disruption, or a desperate push before winter stalls the battlefield? The emerging pattern aligns with what Western analysts now label the simultaneous destruction axis. In this approach, Ukraine leverages its growing arsenal of F-16's AI-guided drones and multi-origin missile systems to overwhelm Russia's decision-making cycle. A senior NATO advisor quoted in The Guardian described it as tempo dominance, a strategy that forces Moscow to react constantly, never regain initiative. In one such operation, a barrage of decoy drones triggered the launch of dozens of Russian interceptors in western Crimea. Just minutes later, real Storm Shadow missiles struck airbases in Kacha and radar hubs near Feodosia. The domino effect from this acceleration is severe. When multiple strategic sites are hit in a short time, Russia's emergency response teams get overextended. Damaged radar installations can't be replaced fast enough. Fuel leaks go unrepaired. Supply depots remain offline. communications fail. According to DW, this method has already crippled 3 major military hubs in Crimea, reducing operational coherence by 40%. Opportunity costs pile up in parallel. Moscow has begun diverting mobile radars from the Donetsk front and reservists from the Kursk region to cover Crimea's growing vacuum. These withdrawals create exploitable gaps elsewhere, weakening other war fronts. In a recently declassified report by Defense News, U.S. intelligence noted that Russia pulled 2 electronic warfare brigades from Belgorod in early October, leaving that region vulnerable to HIMARS raids. Ukraine's strategy isn't just about strikes, it's about forcing Russia to overcommit to a defensive cul-de-sac. Strategically, the contrast is now staggering. What was supposed to be Russia's Black Sea bastion is now a hemorrhaging liability. Ukrainian forces haven't just pierced the fortress they've made defending it too expensive. Ports like Feodosia and Sevastopol operate under constant threat, with dock workers reportedly sleeping in shelters. Russia's own Izvestia recently acknowledged disruptions in naval logistics, citing delayed ammunition deliveries due to technical complications, a euphemism for drone blockades. And yet, Ukraine's weapon mix keeps evolving. New Western radar jamming systems delivered in late September now allow drones to approach deeper inland without detection. Al Jazeera reports that Ukrainian Flamingo drones equipped with thermal cloaking modules bypassed 2 Pantsir S-1 systems during a nighttime raid, hitting an ammo storage site near Krasnovardiiska. This adaptability gives Ukraine not just firepower, but strategic unpredictability. Meanwhile, the pressure isn't only on Crimea's defenders. Russia's central command is beginning to fracture under the burden of multiple crises. The military-industrial base, strangled by sanctions, is incapable of rapid replenishment. Analysts estimate that replacing a destroyed Nebo-U radar now takes 9 to 12 months due to rare component shortages. In the words of a British MOD expert, every successful Ukrainian strike today is a radar offline next summer. What happens if Ukraine maintains this level of tempo into November and beyond? What if the strikes don't slow down but accelerate? The answer lies in Ukraine's next 3-pronged gambit, an evolving siege that no longer waits for Russia to react, but instead tries to break the peninsula in body, spirit, and logic. In late October 2025, as satellite reconnaissance revealed new patterns of troop redeployment around Jankoy and Kerch NATO, analysts warned Ukraine may now be transitioning from attritional warfare to full-spectrum destabilization. Could the next phase finally turn Crimea from a military outpost into a trap of its own making? What's unfolding is a 3-scenario outlook, each defined by tempo coordination and strategic impact. The first is sustained pressure through rhythmic attrition, the approach Ukraine has mastered for over a year. As long as it continues to degrade key pillars, air defense, radar surveillance, and supply arteries, the burden on Russian logistics will grow. Each week brings another hit: a radar station darkened near Cape Tarkankut, a rail bridge sabotaged outside Armyansk, or a missile depot in Sevastopol reduced to rubble. According to BBC's latest frontline analysis, these repeated tactical strikes now produce a cumulative delay of 7 to 10 days in resupply missions across Crimea. Domino effects multiply quickly. When bridges are down, trucks get rerouted. When roads are mined, airlifts are prioritized, draining aviation fuel. When fuel depots are hit, generators fail. When lights go out, drone detection weakens. This chain doesn't merely slow operations, it deforms entire logistics cycles. The strategic opportunity cost: every supply delay in Crimea means critical gaps elsewhere. Russia has already postponed the reinforcement of Svatove and delayed Iskander redeployments in Belgorod due to resource bottlenecks stemming from Crimea's maintenance burden. The second scenario, far more volatile, is accelerated multi-domain collapse. With the arrival of Western-supplied F-16s in Mykolaiv and Kharkiv by late October, Ukrainian forces can now orchestrate joint strikes across land, sea, and air within minutes. Combined with new tactical satellite feeds from U.S. Space Command and Sweden's Orion drone program, Ukraine could launch overlapping offensives across Crimea's eastern corridor, severing the Chongar and Henichesk crossings, while saturating Sevastopol's radar grid. According to Defense News, this scenario would result in what strategists call a strategic black hole, a space too dangerous for Russian aircraft, too contested for vehicles, and too demoralized for troops to operate effectively. The strategic contrast here becomes brutal. A land Russia spent billions to annex becomes a sinkhole for men, material, and morale. But perhaps the most dangerous possibility is the third irreversible psychological collapse. Western experts from RAND and the German Council on Foreign Relations argue that Ukraine's most effective weapon might not be firepower, but repetition. When every day brings another explosion, another radar blackout, another convoy destroyed, even the toughest garrisons lose cohesion. Civilian panic is rising too. DW reports that black markets now flourish in Feodosia, and power outages exceed 14 hours daily in Simferopol. In this nightmare spiral, the Kremlin faces choices that come with steep opportunity costs. Reinforce Crimea and risk exposing the Donbass, or hold Donbass and watch Crimea rot from within. One retired NATO commander quoted in Reuters summarized the dilemma: Crimea is now a booby-trapped trophy. Every attempt to hold it bleeds Russia more. If the psychological toll deepens and Russia's manpower or morale slips further, the very presence of 60,000 troops could become unsustainable. What's the tipping point between defense and defeat? How many more weeks of targeted pressure before Crimea collapses? Not from external fire, but internal fracture. As Russia's control frays at the edges, the next chapter will expose how Moscow tries to reverse the tide with countermeasures, decoys, and desperation in equal measure. By October 30, 2025, satellite footage confirmed that Russia had deployed dozens of inflatable decoy systems across key military sites in Crimea: fake radar units, dummy S-400 launchers, and inflatable trucks parked at empty airbases. Was this Russia's comeback plan, or simply camouflage against collapse? In reality, these efforts reflect a deeper desperation. With mounting losses, Moscow is now turning to psychological and technological deception to delay Ukraine's offensive edge. Yet, as Military Watch magazine points out, the effectiveness of these decoys is limited. Thermal imaging radar signature mismatches and AI-powered targeting systems can often distinguish between real and fake within seconds. As a result, Ukrainian strikes are becoming more precise, not less. In fact, a Flamingo drone strike near Belbek Air Base on October 28th bypassed a field full of decoys and directly targeted an operational command trailer, confirming the Guardian's analysis that Kiev's systems are evolving faster than Russia can fake them. Russia's short-range defenses, including Tor M2s and Pantsir S1s, now operate on rotation across Crimea, attempting to intercept nightly drone swarms. But this comes at a cost. Al Jazeera reports that these systems are firing an average of 30-50 missiles per night, unsustainable without significant replenishment. And with sanctions biting hard, Russia's ability to produce interceptors at scale is compromised. Each intercepted drone might buy one night's safety, but each missile used also reduces strategic stockpiles. The opportunity cost grows heavier. Instead of defending high-value zones like Belgorod or Kursk, Russia's most advanced short-range defenses are stuck babysitting Crimea, an area once believed to be secure. This shift drains protection from more active fronts and signals to NATO observers that Moscow is reacting, not dictating. According to a Reuters defense intelligence summary, at least 3 major Russian counter-battery units from Zaporizhzhia were diverted south in October, leaving gaps that Ukraine immediately exploited with HIMARS strikes. The strategic contrast is striking. Crimea was supposed to showcase Russian military modernization. Now it showcases its exhaustion. Naval vessels dock for weeks, afraid to soar tie beyond Sevastopol's narrow defense corridor. Reconnaissance flights are limited to dawn hours. Fuel convoys are disguised as civilian trucks. According to DW, at least 20% of Crimea's power grid now runs on portable generators due to repeated hits on substations, and NATO is watching. Western analysts increasingly view Crimea as a barometer of Russia's overall war stamina. The United States under President Trump has maintained a hands-off posture on direct involvement, but continues to supply advanced systems and intelligence. A White House aide recently told NYT, "We're not pulling the trigger, but we're making sure Ukraine never runs out of ammo." This in turn reshapes the broader geopolitical picture. If Crimea falls either militarily or psychologically, it may mark the most significant Russian retreat since the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. The credibility of Moscow's southern flank would be shattered. Turkey, Georgia, and NATO's Black Sea strategy would shift overnight. And Ukraine would not only regain ground, it would redefine modern warfare as a realm where creativity and courage beat sheer volume. How long can Moscow play defense in a war where time, morale, and technology are slipping through its fingers? In this unraveling, Crimea becomes more than territory. It becomes the question haunting both generals and politicians: what happens when a fortress turns into a trap?